past, Bear Creek Township has been fairly contentious, some of the issues that have come up. And does that resolve that? Is that?
I like to say our meetings are boring now, which is new, but they're boring in a good way. We have gotten to the point where we've resolved a lot of the issues by simply taking an objective look at them. When we got in, there was a couple of lawsuits pending, which we were able to look at as a board and say, even if we win this lawsuit, what are we winning? We weren't winning enough to justify the cost of continuing it. And that was one of the things that we did early on, was try to take an objective look at everything and not have personalities come in play. Because when you have personalities come in play at any level of government, then it stops being about what's good for the people, and it ends up being, what's good for me as opposed to what's good for someone else. So yeah, that has helped significantly in terms of the differences that we've made. It's funny. I was at a Lions Club, Bear Creek Lions Club breakfast over the weekend, and was hit by a couple of people who wished me good luck, but were hating me for throwing my hat into the ring for this job. And I said, well, I'll take that as a compliment then, because that means we're doing things the right way. So that was good to hear.
Are you supportive of certain reforms in Harrisburg, things along the line of transparency or otherwise? And if so, could you give us some specifics?
Well, I like the transparency that's become over the last few years in campaign finance reporting. I think they've done a lot of good work there. I think they can still make some improvements in terms of the availability of the information, the ability to do things with the information, because right now you can get the reports pretty easily, but it's a little more difficult to do any kind of meaningful analysis without tying up a lot of time into it. That's obviously one thing. I would like to see, similar to what we've done at the township, somewhere where our residents can get into a website and find out exactly what our state dollars are being spent on. And I think that's an area that we fall short on. The other thing, just as another example, I hear quite a bit people saying, we never got the property tax reform we were promised with the casino gaming. But if you go through the state websites, there's little reports about how much money has been saved in property taxes because of the casino games. If that's true, if that's proven true, then the state needs to do a better job of sharing that information and showing people exactly what they saved and how they saved it and what they'd be paying had it not been for example, for the casino games or any other reforms that are going to come down the road.
Are you in favor of term limits?
I am, and I'll answer this in two ways. I'm not in favor of term limits in general, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, I think the democratic system is its own version of term limits. If we have a legislator in there who's not doing his job, it's incumbent upon the voters of the area to make sure that person is moved out. The other reason that I'm not for them is I think it runs the risk of just increasing voter apathy. We have terrible turnouts right now. I think we've said about 4,000 voters in the 119th district have voted over the last 3 elections out of probably close to 20,000 or over 20,000 registered Democrats. 20% is just not good enough. If we create a system with term limits and now someone's in there next to last election, am I going to come out and vote for him? You know what? I don't care. He can get in one more time and he'll be out next year, so I'm not going to show up and vote. We don't need any more additional incentives for people to not show up and vote. That being said, I am in favor of term limits in leadership positions in Harrisburg, because I think that's where they can be more effective. Leadership not only within the House and Senate itself, but probably even more importantly, leadership in the committees, because the committees are the ones who truly drive what bills even make it back to the House and Senate for consideration. You know, from the time a bill is introduced, it goes to committee. If the committee doesn't like it, or more importantly, if the committee leader doesn't like it, it'll never see the light of day again. It will never get back to the House for their consideration, and that's a disservice to the voters. And I think that's where we need to make sure that there's some churn in leadership, particularly on those committees.
Is the legislature too big right now?
Well, I think statistically that's undeniable that they're too big. They're, I think, the largest by number, the largest in terms of staff, full-time legislators, full-time staff in the country. I think we're second largest even to Nebraska. I think is first in people per legislator in terms of population. You know, just by those simple benchmarks, yeah, the legislature is probably too big right now, and I would support a call to reduce that legislative size and staff, which would hopefully fall accordingly anyway, but to the extent that it needed to be included legislatively, it would. Knowing full well that I could legislate myself right out of a job, my thoughts on that is if I have the courage to go to Harrisburg and legislate myself out of a job, I won't be out of work all that long.
Can you imagine legislators returning to part-time? You haven't always been full-time.
I can, and I'll tell you, it's a difficult proposition. I know other states do part-time legislators as well. I can tell you, even just from the township standpoint, which is obviously much smaller but similar, I'm probably putting in between 20 and 30 hours a week on township work. And that's in addition to, you know, a 40-hour-a-week job, which isn't really a 40-hour-a-week job, but we all know how that goes, in the private sector. So while it would be difficult, it could be done, and I think it's something that in the context of overall government reform should at least be considered, definitely.
Are you opposed to the per diems, or it would be your decision not to accept them personally?
Both. I would not accept them personally, and I am opposed to them. It's interesting that you know, the per diems have obviously a seriously negative connotation to them right now. But if we look at the federal government and federal employees, and I think a lot of the state employees, they are entitled to per diems on a daily basis in lieu of having to keep expense statements and keep receipts. It's the way things have worked in the past. But I think at the legislative level, certainly, we have to have more accountability to the residents and the voters who've put us there. You know, I've got 25 years in business, and a lot of what I do is work on behalf of other companies. So when I'm out working for one of my clients, I can bill them expenses. I have always billed based on actual expenses. It's never has it been I'll bill you $162 per day or whatever the agreed upon number is. I just think it's far more reflective of the culture we need to not have to not choose per diems. And as I said earlier, I wouldn't take them, and I would support legislation to require expenses and receipts for all expenditures.